People in the UK are losing sight of what their own army is for. A government report suggests that's one of the greatest threats facing the military. According to MPs, the winding down of the campaign in Afghanistan and a reduced appetite for overseas interventions could lead the public to question whether the army still has a purpose. Disillusionment is apparently being driven by severe budget cuts and what is seen as a failure to come up with a long-term strategic vision. Britain, which is among the top 5 military spenders in the world, plans to slash personnel numbers by 20,000 over the next 6 years. RT's Tesa Arcilla investigates.
The Army's recruiting.
But applicant numbers are slow to pick up. Amid thousands of layoffs, there's a massive drive to recruit Army reservists. But leaked mid-year Army memos reveal the number of people enlisting in the Army Reserve over a 3-month period was just 367, barely a quarter of the target. The Ministry of Defense said that after ramping up the recruitment drive in September, there were more than 1,500 applicants in the first 4 weeks, and that it's too early to make a conclusion. But this young man says he simply can't be convinced.
My grandparents were in the Air Force, actually, during the Second World War. At the time they joined, it wasn't such a bad idea to be joining the forces because they were fighting a war against fascism. I don't agree with the way the army is used by our governments these days. It's used as an invasionary force, as an aggressor rather than a defender.
This monument was erected to commemorate the conscientious objectors to military service, those who would exercise their right to refuse to kill. Now, at the time of the First World War, for instance, they faced arrests or jeers from some in society who viewed them as cowards. But times have indeed changed. A decade of fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan has made the British war-weary.
And most people join the armed forces to be in the peace business, not in the war business, because actually it's a threat to their livelihoods. Nobody wants to be in a war. You'd be crazy to be in a war.
Activists have also lashed out at recruitment campaigns targeted at 16 and 17-year-olds, who, according to one recent study, are more susceptible to post-traumatic stress disorder.
At the moment, we're asking a 16-year-old who we don't trust to drink a pint of beer in the pub, we don't trust to vote in a general election. We're asking that person to make a very far-reaching legal commitment. It's not a career like being a baker or an accountant.
The Ministry of Defense says the report completely ignores the benefits and opportunities that a military career offers young people. But for this young man, it's a career path he isn't ready to change his mind about.
It's not attractive as a job anymore. They're going to have to show people that if you're joining the army nowadays, you're not going to be sent abroad to shoot people who've done nothing against our country.
Tesa Arcilla, RT, London.
Joe Glenton is a former British soldier who refused to serve a second tour in Afghanistan on moral grounds and was thrown into a military prison. He believes people aren't fed up with the troops, but politicians who send them overseas to fight wars they themselves started.
I was had questions, but in the military there's just no forum to air them. It's not like the Oxford Debating Society. Obviously you're just told to crack on and told that the politics have nothing to do with you. By defence they mean offensive capability, and they mean wars and invasions and the use of drones and special forces, which is increasingly the trend. Clearly people want to be secure, and that's not what the public generally have a problem with. What they have a problem with is repeated operations along the lines of Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, nearly Syria. People are not sympathetic to those in the corridors of power who start these wars. And this is part of the reason why we've seen increasingly the kind of lionisation of the military, and that you can call it the heroisation. And you see this increasingly, this very jingoistic kind of building up and placing on a pedestal of military personnel. And that, for me, is to counter the groundswell of popular opposition.